just another great season on Fox Sports for he and Gus and the rest of that crew. Just again, those shots of the Ohio State-Michigan game of both teams coming out of the tunnel with the snow falling, right? I mean, that was amazing.
So good.
Amazing. And then he and Gus called the Big Ten championship game this weekend, and he's joining us right now, I believe, from the Hall of Fame ceremonies that are going down in Las Vegas, Nevada, involving college football. Joel Klatt joining us here from Fox Sports back on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Joel?
Good, bud. How are you?
I'm better for talking to you. I'm seriously mad. I mean, like, going into the Michigan-Ohio State game, I was nervous as a cat. And so I didn't want to be part of any of the hype and the pregame stuff. I flipped the game on like 10 minutes before, and they're showing both teams coming out of the tunnel, the snow coming down. I'm thinking to myself, with all due respect to SEC and Pac-12 and other parts of this great football-loving nation, that's what football is. That's college football right there, man.
It was
right.
It was so good.
That was it.
I mean, the energy was amazing in the building. I mean, that's, I think, an obvious. But then just the scene, it was epic. It was, I was down on the field before the game,
right?
And I'm standing with a few of the guys, and the snow starts to just like come down softly, and we're all sitting there, and we're just like, this is perfect. This is perfect. This is the perfect scene. Now, I don't think that the Ohio State fans thought that because they got a pass-oriented offense. So it's certainly lending itself towards, favoring Michigan with some of that moisture coming down. But having said that, man, the scene and the atmosphere was second to none.
So do you think the College Football Playoff Committee got it right, Joel? What do you think?
Well, they got the best four teams, which is what they're charged to do. As long as they didn't – I think as long as they didn't factor in a potential rematch with Bama and Georgia in the semifinal, then you can't argue with what they did. Alabama's resume is really good. Michigan's resume is really good. And I think that, both of those teams would have been deserving number one teams. The appearance that there was an avoiding of this semifinal of Georgia-Alabama, I don't love that. Now, they said that didn't take place, so I don't want to knock them for something that they're claiming didn't take place. But having said that, I actually think it would have been better to rematch them and just say, like, listen, we're not going to allow you access to a national championship, just because we think you're good, Georgia, and you're better than Cincinnati because you didn't win a conference championship. That's always been my problem with this model, and it's not going to be fixed anytime soon. Maybe in expansion we can do some things with the language that honor and incentivize the conference championship. But until that happens, this is kind of what you're going to get, and it's certainly not something that Michigan fans wanted to see. You didn't want to see Alabama win because you knew that Georgia matchup was coming down the road.
Well, I'll tell you what, Joel, in all honesty, this is house money to me, and I figure, like, if Michigan's going to reach the promised land, which words I never thought I would say into this microphone, truly, they're going to have to beat the best anyway, and if they're going to have to go through the top two teams of the SEC with due respect to Cincinnati, then so be it. But I didn't get the whole concept of, they don't want to rematch them and being like, so what? So New Year's Eve, folks will be just like, you know what? I'm not interested in Alabama and Georgia. I saw that a month ago. Really? I mean, like, I don't know about that. And in the same way, what people will be less interested on January 10th because we saw it on December 4th. I don't know. I mean, that's to me is more than just a regional game, even though it is technically a conference rematch. I mean, it still would be a month apart, right?
The ratings would suggest, and I don't have them right in front of me, but it was not a very well watched game, if you would say it that way. When Georgia and Alabama played in the national championship a few years ago, when Tua came in off the bench as a freshman. And I think that, there are some, me included, that think that if we do get Georgia and Alabama, I don't think that that's great for the sport. I don't think these rematches within conferences, without an expanded playoff, are good for the sport because it's such a narrow window to get included into the playoffs that this purely subjective measure of four best versus four most deserving, I think has hindered the sport's popularity, to be quite honest with you. And it's made it more regional, and it's made fan bases in other parts of the country, come up with theories and of bias and such that could be true or not true. And so I think that if we can get away from that, it would be better. Rich, I think that we need to go to a 12-team playoff in college football. I think that we need to have the 6 best champions across the sport, conference champions. We need to seed them 1 through 6. The 4 best champions have to win your conference championship, would get a bye. And then the next 4 best teams would host first-round games. And that's ways that we can incentivize not only being great, but winning your conference championship and giving you a distinct advantage at the kickoff of this playoff. One of the things that you think about is that we played this SEC championship game, and it's basically just for like their SEC championship trophy, because Georgia and Alabama get to play on the exact same footing. No one got an advantage over the other in this very narrow playoff and this 4-team subjective race that we have now in this beauty pageant. And I think that's what when we're raised as American sports fans to look at who's being incentive, where's the incentive lie in terms of postseason and who's earning the advantage in the postseason, and then we see what happens in college football. I think we all kind of sit there and pause and think to ourselves, well, this isn't right.
Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show. So do you think the Heisman committee got that right as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I really appreciate the fact that they looked at their model and adjusted. And what they adjusted on is that now they take the 4 top vote getters and bring them as finalists every year, rather than sometimes we would have 3 and sometimes we would have 5, and they did it based on how close the vote was. At least now there's this point of demarcation where it's like, listen, if I'm good enough to be one of the top 4 vote getters in the Heisman Trophy, regardless of how far back I am, because trust me, I guarantee you those guys at 2, 3, and 4 are going to be pretty far back from Bryce Young. I get to go be a Heisman finalist. I get to honor my program and all of those things. So I think that's a really good change that the Heisman has brought to pass over the last couple of years. Having said that, yeah, I think that these were the 4 guys that I was looking at. Will Anderson probably was close to being right there, the outside linebacker, defensive end for Alabama. He's been phenomenal this year. But Aidan Hutchinson just played so dominant in the biggest environments of the year. You look at his back end of the season and what he was able to do, in particular in that Ohio State game, 3 sacks against the best passing offense in the country. I think that they got it right, guys. I think that this guy is an absolute freak and that he deserved to be in New York.
What about top pick? First one heard in Vegas. Now the eye in the sky has got all the tape, save one game for evaluators next year in the NFL, and some of these kids might not play one more bowl game because they're not in the college football playoff. So what do you think? Is Aidan Hutchinson first overall? How does that suss out to you right now?
He's definitely going to be in play. Now, there are guys, I think Kayvon Thibodeau may be more physically gifted than Aidan Hutchinson, but he doesn't come close to playing as hard as Hutchinson does on a play-in and play-out basis. Rich, it's amazing how hard this guy plays on every single snap. Runs at him, runs away from him, pass plays, screen plays. It doesn't matter. This dude never stops. It's relentless. It's beautiful to watch. He's also very skilled, and he has a plan. He's strong. He's got all the things that you probably sit there and roll your eyes at for over the, however long, 20 years you've been doing it. He's got the speed, the power, and he can flip his hips and yada, yada, yada. You know what he does? He gets it done, man. He's a football playing Jesse. And I think that he'll absolutely be in play at that top pick because of it.
Which quarterback do you think gets pushed to the top because there's a need and so on and so forth? First blush right here in early December. Joel,
I'm not sure. I would probably say Matt Corral. He's got, to me, the most physically gifted upside, and I think he would be that guy. But I've got this sneaky suspicion that Kenny Pickett is going to be the fastest riser up boards of the draft season, the quarterback from Pitt. He just reminds me too much of the Mac Jones, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield has played a lot of football, and then you put on his tape and you're like, man, he gets it. He's accurate. So I would say just like watch out for Kenny Pickett.
Do you think the Heisman committee can remake the trophy for Kenny if he wins it as a fake slide instead of a stiff arm? What do you think? Do you think you can do that?
That would be amazing. And when you actually throw, it's almost like a dead leg, like fake slide.
That's amazing.
More power to you. It's an amazing move. I would have torn both knees trying to do that.
Where do you stand though on the debate that it shouldn't be allowed though? What do you think? That he utilized that player safety rule to his advantage to dupe the backs into thinking he's sliding and then scored. Where do you stand on that one?
Yeah,
Joel?
I mean, that's a tough one because it's so. I guess it's so subjective. I mean, it gets back to almost like the Tuck rule. Listen, I think that if there's any, it should be like the fair catch. It's like the hand can barely go up, and they're like, nope, that's a fair catch. They just like err on the side of fair catch. And we always say that like the ball goes back to the spot where you start to give yourself up. Mm-hmm. Well, if you start to give yourself up, play should be dead, right? If we're going to take the ball back to that point, then that's what they're telling us anyways, right? Is that the play is dead at that moment, that when you start to give yourself up. So if there's any inclination that you're going to give yourself up feet first, I think that the play should be dead, whether your knee hits the ground or not. That's how I think that we should play it. It should be almost identical to the fair catch.
Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show. Last one for you, Joel. I'm sure you have an opinion on all this about what's going on with Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly and now Cristobal going from Oregon to Miami. But, the latter doesn't compare to the first two because the first two happened just as the season had ended, right, for those teams. And Notre Dame's season was still very much alive for a national championship. And I had Lincoln Riley on yesterday and asked him if this December 15th signing date is something he'd be willing to or to move. Because that seems to be to be crunching all of these programs and coaches to make decisions that are ugly for kids, and it's bad looks all around. And I'm just wondering why school presidents and those in management and athletic departments don't have a problem with it. Like that, yeah, let's just keep signing these kids on December 15th and make it a big problem for everybody.
The problem with college football is that there are too many academics involved and not enough businessmen. Okay, because college football just lives in theories. And then it takes 18 committees of 30 people to sit around and debate something, and then someone decides that it's going to happen. And it's the bureaucracy in our sport is the worst part about it. Now, that doesn't answer your question, but it gets at kind of what the root issue is. We decided that we were going to do this early signing day period, which I don't think benefits anybody. In fact, I think it was born out of the coaches' anxiety through the holiday season and bowl season about the impending signing day in February, which is where it was traditionally. I think it was like the first Wednesday in February is where it was traditionally at, and it should go back to that. Because not only are we getting now, because of the structure of the sport, these types of emotional decisions, which leave people spurned and burned and it kind of like sends shockwaves through whole programs like Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, when it shouldn't be that way. And there should be time to make this decision and to move forward. So I think that the recruiting calendar should absolutely be looked at. But also, Rich, I think that we should adopt more NFL-style rules because they do it right in terms of the league year and the calendar and when are there tampering rules in effect and when are there not? When can you talk to guys and when can you not? Because college football is the Wild West, and I think that we need some of those guardrails, and they've been so they've pushed against those guardrails so much. In part because there's no overarching governing body. We don't have a commissioner that looks out for the best part of the sport or the best interest of the sport. All we have is special interests throughout the sport, whether it's conferences or programs or coaches or players themselves, and everybody acts in their own best interest. That's the structure of our sport. Well, that's not going to be good for it long term, in particular with the revenue that we're bringing in and what we're doing from a media standpoint. This is not healthy when you're talking about guys getting paid $100 million to leave 18 to 22-year-olds in the middle of the night. That just is not healthy. So I think that we need to take a look at all of those structure things, take a look at, quote unquote, a league year, what a calendar looks like, when can you talk to people, when can you not, when are there tampering charges, when are there not, and move forward from there.
I agree with you, Joel. But the question is why don't others, like Joe Castiglione in Oklahoma, right? He's as good as they come in his position. He's got to go through a season wondering, is Lincoln Riley talking to USC or somebody else? And he's, of course he's not fine with having his coach being poached, but so do something about it, right? Like then get down and have all other powerful athletic directors sit down and make a move on this front. And then if you're a coach too, like if you're Lincoln Riley, sure, you and certainly if you're allowed to do it and you can double your salary and get a private jet for your family and pay off mortgages and things like that, you're all in on that sort of thing.
Sure you are.
But you don't want to sit there and answer questions like
he's been vilified for this, and it's like everybody would have done what he did, right? So I hate vilifying him just because of the way it had to happen and the timing in which it had to happen.
Right.
I'll give you another point about this early signing day that doesn't even have to do with coaches. The college coaches, how many times have you heard them lament the fact that they go through the bowl season or even the playoff and a national championship, and then the coaches, Nick Saban has said, like, I got players that have to make a decision about the NFL by next week, and we don't give them enough time to make a decision about their NFL future because of when do they have to declare for the draft, right? So that's the timing of all that. And yet they turn around and do that to high school kids. It's like, oh, okay, so now a high school kid has to play a state championship game and turn around and make a college decision that quickly if he hasn't already committed. It just doesn't make any sense. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. And the bureaucracy of college football is in large part one of the things that hinders it the most.
Joel, I really appreciate the time always. Just, again, great broadcasts, just great. And it really is just somebody who as you know, I have an affinity for you, and I love working with you and getting the opportunity to do that. The fact that your voice was actually associated with football joy for me as opposed to the last 7 years has been a wonderful turn of events. I'll be very honest with you, Joel.
It's going to make the draft better. Let's hope. Right?
I look forward to that already. But in the meantime, let's talk in short order. Really appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate your time, buddy.
That's Joel Klatt, everybody. Right back at you. At Joel Klatt. I follow him on Twitter. You should as well. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.